All right, here we go. Let's have fun. In 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And welcome, everyone, to the Real Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Edwards. Alongside us today, we have Trevor Hardy, the CEO of Blue Wave Solar. Trevor, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. I appreciate your time.
So, Trevor, first question I have for you is renewable energy, solar energy. We're going to be talking a lot about that today. When and why did you get into the solar business?
When did I jump on board the solar coaster? My background is primarily in real estate private equity. So I spent 8 or so years working in the real estate private equity field. That was a great learning experience for me. I think after a while, though, however, I started asking myself the question, is this it? Am I going to spend the rest of my career underwriting large institutional quality real estate assets? In 2010, I had my first son. I've got 2 young boys, both of whom I'm very proud of. And I think at the end of the day, I was looking for something more meaningful to do. And I really wanted to say to my boys, before I get put in a box in the ground, I wanted to feel good about saying to them, hey guys, this is what your father did. And most importantly, I'm proud of what I did. And most importantly, I'm proud of the fact that I had a positive impact on this world. So with the crash of the real estate markets in 08 and 09, that was a tremendous learning experience for me. I saw literally billions of dollars get wiped off the table and wiped off a lot of the transactions I've been working on. I started thinking about, hey, I want to do something more meaningful. My parents are actually farmers in South Africa, and I was always intrigued with land development. The idea of farming the sun was very to me. And then, most importantly, Kevin, I think for me, I also saw the massive influx of institutional capital in the real estate space. And I started tracking what I thought would be realistic yields on renewable assets. And there was a massive, massive spread there, which just didn't make any rational sense to me. So, at that stage, yields on institutional quality Class A real estate assets were trading in the mid-single digits. And in those days, the Wild West of the solar industry, you could buy a very small, solar farm at a, low teens yield. So, and the credit standing behind that solar project was stronger than the credit that was standing behind the large institutional office building, for example. So I saw that mispricing in the market, and I also saw where I thought large institutional real estate owners were going. A lot of them were starting to have very stringent requirements from a sustainability perspective, and I thought there would be a massive opportunity and a significant transformation in the capital markets where a lot of that institutional capital would start moving towards the renewable space, not only because it was a rational economic thing to do, but also because it was the right thing to do. So bottom line, that's how I made the transition. I was very fortunate enough to meet Eric, who you've interviewed previously, who's the president of Blue Wave, and the chairman of the company, John DeVilliers, who are both very good friends and obviously close business partners. And they had technically established Blue Wave in early or mid 2010. I spoke with them through 2011 and then joined as the third founding partner in January of 2012 is when I finally took the plunge.
So Trevor, what I find so interesting is, and maybe we could start this conversation off more of just like the personal focus and then go into the solar, kind of like that. But when you were in investment banking or just in banking in general, our guest yesterday on the show was in banking. many founders and many CEOs were in banking, then have this realization or something like that, and they say, I need to do something more meaningful with my life, like you just said. When did you really reach that tipping point that got you over? And maybe can you describe how you knew like this is what I had to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, to be honest, um, there's a large office tower in town, and our head office is in downtown Boston. And I think I'd looked at acquiring the John Hancock building on behalf of the fund that I was working for. I looked at that asset maybe 4 or 5 times. I knew all the tenants that were in there, and we'd looked at taking debt positions in the asset. We'd looked at acquiring the asset probably 2 or 3 times, and I don't know. I think I asked myself the question, like, is this what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life? And I don't mean to knock that at all. I think that's a really challenging and a creative and an interesting industry to be in. But for me, long term, I think my gut, I knew that it wasn't going to fulfill me on a long term basis. So I don't think it was necessarily one specific, it's not like there was an epiphany one day. But over a series of years, I really started searching for something that I think resonated with me more personally. And renewables was definitely the world that I wanted to be in. And then I would say one last thing, sorry to drag on the answer, but I happened to be up in Vermont. That was the winter of 2010, I think. And there was a multiple axis tracking solar system that had just been installed as a test, a pilot facility in northern Vermont that was under construction. And they just finished the first installation. And I think my wife thought I was crazy, but instead of skiing one day, I went, through the woods trying to find this thing. And I was standing there, and if there was one moment where I remember clearly saying to myself, this is what I'm going to do. It was an overcast late morning, and then all of a sudden the sun came out, and this tracker, started pivoting towards the sun, moved this entire array of modules to face the sun. And I was just standing there thinking, man, this is one of the coolest things I've seen in a long time. And I think that was also another a specific moment where I said to myself, like, why aren't we doing this as a community? We've got this unbelievable resource. Why aren't we doing this? It seems to be the most obvious thing. I mean, there are challenges associated with solar power and solar energy. But if I had to pick on a specific point in time, that would be one of them.
So now we're on the solar coaster. So now we've officially joined the solar coaster, and you've got this great background in finance and technology. I asked the question yesterday, at what rate does technology become adopted? Is it trust? Is it competency? And what I find so unique about Blue Wave Solar is you give people such incredible low risk solutions to get solar into your community and have it be funded until it makes money. What kind of instruments are you using to make sure that solar can be adopted?
That's a broad question. I would say fundamentally appealing to people's rational economic sense. People, I think, want to do, or people, and when I say people, I'm referring to, homeowners, but also communities, organizations, companies. They want to do the right thing. But I think when it becomes a rationally economic choice to make, i.e., hey, as a homeowner, I could subscribe to a local community solar farm and save up to 10% off my utility bill. Why wouldn't I do that? I think that's one of the messages that we try and focus on. And look, John DeVille is the chairman of our company. Was the former Secretary of the Environment in Massachusetts. headed the New England region of the EPA. Our DNA is focused on the environment. That's why we do what we do. But I think for a lot of people, that's important. But until it makes rational economic sense, and you can explain to them in a very simple way that if you choose this, you will save money. And most importantly, you can then tell your neighbors that you're doing that, and you can feel good about it. I think you struggle to get the adoption that you think would be a no-brainer.
Yeah, and we're seeing that all around the world. Yeah, I think renewable energies and alternative energies are increasing as coal and fossil fuels are slowly decreasing. They are a lot more, but definitely on that path. And I think the one example that sticks out to me, I think it was this year, was in India. Are you aware of what happened in India this year? I know they didn't get enough bids on this big coal farm, and they were able to produce like 950 megawatts or something like that for like 1 cent, virtually for free. And so they are now investing a ton into renewable energy
Yeah.
along with the rest of the world in India, which is saying something, right? So in terms of this adoption, like where do you see solar going in the United States first and then around the world?
Yeah, I think listen, and I'm biased obviously, but there's no doubt in my mind that solar is going to change the world as we know it.
Hmm.
And it's not solar alone on a standalone basis. It's solar integrated with economic storage, which is critical. And I think, Kevin, that's going to be one of the dynamics which over the course of the next 5 to 10 years is going to be, gasoline on the solar fire, is the cost-effective integration of battery storage. Because that, obviously is solar's biggest handicap.
Right.
Sure, you can power all sorts of things when the sun is shining, but if you cannot cost effectively store that energy, it's not really a base load and sustainable long-term solution. There is concentrated solar and some other more interesting technological solutions which address that. But bottom line to your question, I think solar is going to continue to grow exponentially in the US, particularly with the integration of storage. And when you look at, for example, in the Northeast, a lot of our business is based in the Northeast New England region. I think I think all of the New England states have set goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. And when you look at what needs to happen in order to get there, we have to accelerate the amount of solar and renewable power that we are generating exponentially. So in the US, I think it's a no-brainer, and I say a no-brainer because it makes fundamental economic sense. Right now, solar and wind are the cheapest sources of new power. And you asked about international. I'm not particularly familiar with India. I'm from South Africa originally. Blue Wave has a small office out down in Cape Town. And we actually have a fair amount of development activity down there, which unfortunately has been mothballed for a few years. But South Africa, I think, has built 2 of the largest coal-fired power stations in the world over the course of the last 10 years. I can't recall the numbers offhand, but both of them are many times over budget. They're 7 to 10 years late. The cost of every kilowatt hour that those facilities are generating are far and above, I think almost 2x where the last round of renewable power projects bid. I think in Rand cents, they were bidding in at around 70 to 80 cents a kilowatt hour, and the levelized cost from those coal-fired power stations was around Rand 20 to Rand 40, depending on the price of coal. So Again, it makes perfect rational economic sense to do so. And in a country like South Africa, where you've got some of the most incredible solar and wind resource in the world, South Africa should be, and it was, unfortunately, up until some political hiccups, and it will be doing so hopefully again. But that should be South Africa's moment to shine.
Right.
And when you look at the broader economic impact of installing these large solar farms, where you're also employing local people to build the facilities, you're employing local people to manage and maintain those facilities. A lot of those facilities in rural areas, which are really, really struggling economically, I mean, it is a no-brainer. So, sorry, long-winded answer to your question, but I get excited about this stuff.
No, not at all. I'm excited too. Thanks for sharing, Trevor. Storage. This is always seems to be the argument, is storage. How do we store something like gasoline? You can put it in a barrel, you can ship it across the country, ship it across the world. I personally don't know. I know it's stored in batteries. I don't know what that looks like. Could you maybe break down from not just for me, but the audience, how your energy is stored and what are some of the challenges right now with this infrastructure?
Yeah, so I'll qualify everything that I'm about to say. I'm no storage expert.
Okay.
We are learning right now. We are in the process of breaking ground on about 16 megawatts worth of solar projects, all of which will have battery storage integrated. 16 megawatts. Yeah, 16 megawatts for folks who aren't that familiar. A 1 megawatt solar facility will take up about 5 to 7 acres of land, depending on the configuration of the modules, et cetera. So roughly that's all in about 100 acres worth of panels that we're literally going to be going into the ground with in the next month or two. It's always gets interesting building through the New England winters.
I'm sure.
But all of that 16 megawatts is going to have DC coupled storage, which means that the batteries are sitting on the same side of the meter, the electrical meter that the solar farm is sitting on. So as kilowatt hours are generated by the solar facility, those battery systems, which are typically lithium ion, to be 100% honest, the projects that we are breaking ground with, I don't know offhand exactly what the specific battery technology is. But in a lot of cases, it's lithium ion, but there are all kinds of different solutions out there. But what it effectively enables us to do, Kevin, and enables the grid to do, it brings a tremendous amount of stability to the grid. So one of the challenges, as we were touching on earlier with solar power generation, is just the intermittency and the unpredictability. And what that storage really becomes, the easiest way to think about it is it's basically a shock absorber. So it's a shock absorber for delivering that power into the grids at a time when it's most needed, and often when it's most precious from an economic standpoint. So Blue Wave is learning. We're actually partnering with a large company, I can't disclose who just yet, who are storage experts. And they're one of our largest clients also on the community solar side of our business. And we're going to be working with them to build out 16 megawatts of storage integrated solar in Massachusetts in the next 4 to 6 months.
That's awesome.
We're very, very excited about.
Yeah, congratulations. That's great. You mentioned the harsh New England environment. Are people worried about, solar obviously needs the sun. The sun only comes up a certain amount of time during the year. For instance, like in Alaska, right now there's probably 2 hours of sunshine a day. In the summer, though, it's 22 hours a day as well. But is that ever a problem in certain types of areas around the world?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it has an impact, but what you've got to look at is not only the resource that's available. So, for example, in South Africa, the resource is incredible. Probably in in one instance, in one of our large farms, which is a 360 megawatts development, it hasn't been built yet in South Africa. We've got 2x the amount of solar resource there as we do in New England. So the solar resource is important, but what is equally, if not more important, Kevin, is what is the value of every kilowatt hour that solar facility is generating? So simply put, what is the cost of electricity?
Okay.
Because that really determines the value of that solar kilowatt hour. And in New England, specifically in Massachusetts, where we happen to be at the end of the gas line, and we're shutting down nukes. We have I think a demographic here which is very focused on encouraging the deployment and integration of renewables. The cost of electricity is high. So the value of solar is also very high. And so going back to your question, I mean, solar is not a solution that works everywhere. But in most cases, it does. But you can't only look at the amount of solar resources. You've got to look at the entire value proposition.
You mentioned in one of the first opening statements about why you went into solar and how you believe this could fundamentally revolutionize the world and change the world and make it a better place. And I agree with that too, in the sense that we fight over resources. And the example I like to give is I interviewed this, I don't know if you know who Akon is by chance, but he's doing this big, you mentioned Africa, a big Akon Lighting Africa project. And they established this $1 billion credit line with the Chinese solar panel manufacturer, brought in solar panels and lights to all these people in rural cities to give them power, electricity, to get stay late at night, no kerosene lanterns, all this great stuff. But the reason he didn't do it was to create renewable energy. The reason he had to do it was because the governments over there are very tied close to these oil farms or these oil plants. And you look at, I mean, I don't want to get political at all, but you look at what's happening right now with the bombings of oil fields and the wars that could potentially start out of that. The question I have for you, Trevor, is this something, since I know Blue Wave Solar is community driven right now, is this something where every community could be powered by solar in the long?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think it's realistic to assume that communities will be able to rely on solar only.
Right.
Okay. I just don't think that's realistic. But solar with storage integrated can become a very, very meaningful portion of the load requirements. And going back to what I was saying earlier about why I feel so strongly that solar is likely to change the world long term is with storage integration, every home has the opportunity to effectively become its own mini utility. And think about that from an infrastructure point of view. Think about that from a grid stability point of view. And it's a very significant challenge for the utility companies out there, because as the economic incentive increases for more and more people to go off the grid, particularly as storage integration becomes real, the cost of maintaining that grid is not changing.
Right.
So that cost is now getting spread over fewer and fewer people, which in turn drives the cost of every kilowatt hour that you buy from the utility company up, which then in turn increases the incentive for you to go off grid if you can afford to do so. And now there's a lot of very competitive financing products available out there. So I think it's a really significant challenge for large utility companies, particularly ones who aren't getting ahead of the parade and frankly joining the parade.
And speaking of join the parade, Trevor, we look at like electronic vehicles and complementary commodities, like how much do you think those type of commodities or instruments or vehicles play a role in the adoption of solar?
Huge, huge. An EV, an electric vehicle. I'm a very proud owner of a plug-in electric hybrid Volvo station wagon where I throw the boys and the dog and everyone in every weekend. But think of an electric vehicle as a mobile battery. That's all it is. So if you have the opportunity to park, you can paint a picture which is real for a number of people today. They can drive to work in the morning, park in a solar PV, under a solar PV canopy, charge their car with solar power, drive home, and effectively plug the house into the car, not the other way around. And I don't think, cars are to the point yet where you can realistically live off the power from the car alone, but that world is coming. And so I think, to answer your question, Kevin, it's another part of the energy revolution. And think of what that electrical demand is going to do to the existing grid infrastructure. It's going to place a significant amount of additional burden on the existing grid infrastructure. But like I said, I'm very proud owner of a plug-in electric hybrid vehicle. I live in a beautiful old house, and technically could put solar panels on my roof, but the house is on the National Register of Historic Places, and I think my neighbors would get pretty upset with me if I did. So I made the choice to subscribe to one of Blue Wave's community solar farms. So I was so proud the day I got that vehicle. This was only 2-3 years ago. I'd been driving a beaten up old Jeep up until then, a real gas guzzler. And I pulled it into the driveway, and I plugged it in, and I took a photograph, and I sent that photograph to a bunch of my close friends and said, hey guys, here's my new leased car, which I'm very proud of. But more importantly, I'm proud of the fact that every kilowatt hour of this vehicle is being generated by one of Blue Wave's community solar farms. So I'm effectively driving around on the solar power, which is being generated by one of our community solar farms. And I'm very proud of that.
And that's a big distinction right there. Just for our audience, could you maybe elaborate on that when you say you don't have solar panels on your roof and how that energy gets to your house?
Yeah. So when I say I'm effectively drawing on those kilowatt hours, the way that community solar basically works is, as power gets generated in a remote facility, that power goes onto the grid. And as it goes onto the grid, it generates what's called a net metering credit. Think about it very simply as being a gift card to the utility company. So I get effectively a gift card in the mail. It's got $100 face value. I pay $90 for that gift card. And that gift card gets applied to my utility bill every month. So all of that happens automatically. And all of those credits are applied every month. So effectively, at the end of the day, by having I don't have any solar panels on my roof, but I'm effectively drawing power indirectly from a community solar farm, which is out in Dover, Massachusetts, and that specific facility is on a landfill. So it's on a piece of land which doesn't have. I couldn't think of a higher and better use than putting solar panels all over the top of that capped landfill.
And Trevor, I think that ties in great with what you were saying at the very beginning was when we were talking about the rate of adoption. Is it trust? Is it competency? And you were saying it's just economic incentives. This, as you coined it, energy revolution is coming and it's trending. What type of leadership is needed amongst business owners, amongst municipalities, government workers? What would you say? What type of leadership is needed?
Bold. And I think now, Kevin, it's a lot easier for people to take that plunge because they see fires burning in Australia. I mean, I think climate change, it still boggles my mind how folks can deny that climate change is real, but I won't even go down that rabbit hole. So in terms of leadership, I think there are bold leaders out there over the course of the last 10 years who I think were at the front of the parades and were advocating for change very early. And this is where I give, chairman of our company, John DeVilliers, a lot of credit. He's been, environmental stewardship has been his career for 40, 50 years. I would put him in that bold leader category. And yeah, I think leaders of companies, communities, municipalities are doing it now, yes, because it makes rational economic sense for them to do so, but they're doing it also because their customers, their constituents are demanding it. So I don't think it requires, to be totally honest, nearly as much audacity as it did, say, 10 years ago. But in a lot of places, and I'm thinking more, broadly in terms of places like South Africa, the Bahamas, where we've been active before as well, the politics is, the juggernaut of politics is very complicated. Mm. And I think it takes, in circumstances like that, where people, to your point earlier, Kevin, where people have the courage to stand up to the large vested interests and say, no, we're not thinking about this in a holistic way. And the true cost of what we are doing here is far, far greater. We may not see it, but you can bet your bottom dollar that our children are going to see it. And we're seeing that already. And I think in those circumstances where politically you have to be brave and bold, a lot more of that is happening, but that's what it requires.
Were these leaders
in a lot of places?
Oh, sorry to cut you off. Were these leaders, Trevor, more scarce when you started, and are you seeing a lot more? Are they still difficult to find in terms of investors, people who are maybe mission aligned? Maybe elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think there's been a sea change since, when I first started looking at this industry, 2008, 2009, it was the Wild West. And I remember also talking to, former colleagues. When I left the real estate private equity fund that I was working at, I mean, they thought that I'd lost my mind when I started talking about solar and renewable power. And I have a very funny recollection of the conversation I had with my senior managing director when I told him what I was doing. So yeah, I think there's been a very significant change. And to be honest, again, what's driving that change is political, a change in the political winds. But I think it's also a change being driven a lot by the capital markets. There's a tremendous amount of capital flowing into this space. And it's flowing into the space because the largest pension funds, the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world are saying, I want you to commit to, placing capital in, companies and opportunities that are, socially, environmentally accretive. So I think there has been a big change in the number of people who are stepping up to the plate.
And Trevor, when we think about leadership, we think of people or organizations that aren't doing something that's externally validated yet. You mentioned the Wild West. Doing something that's not externally validated yet, that fulfills some type of philosophical belief. So whether it's you, John, or Eric in this space, what is leadership to you all, and how would you define your definition of a real leader?
I think a real leader is someone, and I will lean on John here, someone who inspires belief in others. And when I look at our journey at building out Blue Wave, we've been we're tremendously proud of all the projects. We've developed, financed, built over 150 megawatts of projects now. A very significant slug of those are community solar projects. We've impacted a lot of people's lives in a very positive way. We've raised and put over $500 million of capital to work, and we're proud of all of that. But what we're most proud of is the team that we've built. And I think a real leader is someone who consistently inspires the best in others, and inspires them to join a mission. We are very proud of the mission that we're on, which is to revolutionize energy with simple, powerful solar solutions. To me, the simple answer to that question is just it's inspiration. If you cannot get people excited about what you're doing and believe in what you're doing and create a hunger in them to come to work or work remotely every day with the team, whatever it may be, to make positive change in the world, then I think you're going to struggle.
And Trevor, for people that are inspired that by this podcast, they want to join the movement of Blue Wave, can they find more information about what you do? I mean, we talked a lot about solar today, less about the company. Where can they find more information?
Sure. Well, there's a tremendous amount of resource on our website, bluewavesolar.com. But I think, look, Google. There's a tremendous amount. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. There are some tremendous local associations where you can learn a lot about what it means to go renewable. There are a lot of, and I'm reluctant to mention, just because if I mention one and don't mention another, I'll get myself into hot water. But there's some great consumer-focused websites out there that do a tremendous job of educating, answering some very simple questions about what it means to go solar. But absolutely, if folks want to reach out, and specifically as it relates to community solar, if you have any questions, you can input your information into a portal on our website, and someone will absolutely reach out to you, and we'd be happy to have you on the voyage with us.
Well, folks, hop on the solar coaster. We talked about the solar coaster today. We started a little bit with the background. We went up the difficult part, talking about storage and some of the difficulties and challenges solar is facing right now. And then it's belief, it's purpose, it's being a revolutionary commodity that can really change the world. And then following it up with some leadership lessons and advice and what's going to take to establish this along the way. So, Trevor, just want to thank you for your time and coming on here on the Real Leaders Podcast. For Trevor Hardy, I'm Kevin Edwards, asking you to go out there, inspire belief in others, and always, folks, keep it real. Thanks, Trevor.
Kevin, thank you. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
You got it.